Well, hello and welcome back, everyone. This is Jennifer McGuire, and I hope you're having a great week. Today, I am sharing with you ideas for stamp fold card designs. So instead of opening like a typical note card, these cards actually have stamped images that open to reveal the card inside. I'm going to show you a few different variations. I have several cards for you, and I even have a few bonus cards at the end of the video, so stay tuned. Now, these can be done with any images you have, but I'm going to first start with a card design that uses large stamped images, the one you see here. I'll be using the new Studio Katia Lovely Blooms stamp set. Now, Studio Katia has many stamp sets with large floral images like this one, but I really like the style of this new one, and it has a nice mix of flowers. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool simply because it's easier to use, but you can use an acrylic block. I'm stamping with VersaFine black ink on Bristol white cardstock. The reason I'm using Bristol is I plan to use Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens, and they work really well on Bristol. But you can color with whatever coloring method you want and on whatever cardstock you want. I do recommend a heavyweight cardstock. After heat setting the images, it's time to do the coloring. I'm using Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens simply because I find they blend so easily together and they are fun to use. So there are a few different ways to use these pens, and I will link to a video where I describe some of those. But the method I'm using for this particular image is to put down some dark color, then color over it with a lighter color to blend it out. You can also go back and add more dark color if you want to. The reason I use Bristol is this is very smooth and the color moves nicely on it. You could also use watercolor paper and water with these markers. So I will list below in my description the particular colors I use to color in this image. But in each of the little flowers and leaves here, I first applied dark color, then I came in with a lighter to blend it, and then added a little bit more of the dark. It's actually very similar to how I color with Copic markers, but I'll be honest, I think these blend much easier. So after I did all of the leaves, I'm adding some color to the flowers. I use a dark color and a light color, and that's really all you need. If you find you want to have an in-between color, you can touch the tip of the light marker to the tip of the dark marker, and you'll have a little bit of a medium color for a short time. Now these have a real brush tip. It actually has a brush tip to it. So they take a little bit of practice to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, you'll find that they're really fun to use. Here's where I'm touching one tip to the other to pick up a medium shade. So after I've colored this guy in, I'm going to color the other one the exact same way. So as you can see, any coloring method would work for this. You just want them to look the same. So next I'm cutting out these images, leaving a bit of a white trim simply because it's easier to cut out that way. If you have a coordinating die, you can definitely use that instead. Next, I've prepared two pieces of white cardstock. One is a 4 3/4 inch square note card. The other is a 5 inch by 5 inch square piece of white cardstock that will serve as the backing. Now I'm going to have those two floral images kind of wrap around the card, so I need to know where the middle is. So I am drawing a line halfway down the center of the white note card. Using a T-ruler is very easy for this. You do not need to draw this pencil line, I just found it helped. So I am positioning my two images up against that pencil line in the center, and I will hold them there and flip my note card over and draw pencil lines on the back of the flowers where the edges of the note card are. I'm now going to apply a score line where that pencil line is. So I'm lining my pencil line up with a score line in my scoring board. I'm using my Teflon bone folder to add the score, and then I will fold along that score line. So you can see this is scored right along the edge of this large floral image. You can see why using a large image is helpful for this. If you don't have a large image, I'll show you in a bit how you can do this card with smaller images. I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other flower, again scoring along that pencil line and then folding there also. So basically, these two pieces are going to wrap around our card, and when you open them up, you'll see the card inside. So here's my 4 3/4 inch square white note card. Along the edges on the sides of the card, I'm putting some strong double-sided tape. These will hold those flower pieces in place. You want to use strong adhesive here. Any strong adhesive would work. So on one side of the note card, I'll add one of the floral images. So I am wrapping the small flap of one of the flower images around to the back of the card and pressing it into that adhesive. I'm cutting off this little piece that's sticking out the top. Next, I'll do the same to the other side. You can see why you want to use a strong adhesive here, but you can definitely use a liquid adhesive if you have that instead. So again, I'm removing the release paper. I'll add the small flap of that flower image right onto that adhesive. And now we have the two flower pieces kind of wrapping around the front of the card. So you open up those two flaps, and then you will have the card inside. So you can see how this worked great with a large stamped image. It would also work great with large die-cut images, or you can even glue together a couple of medium-sized images for the same effect. So I have some twine here. I'm going to sandwich this twine between this little card that we made and the back piece. Now earlier I cut a piece of white cardstock for the back piece of this card, but I decided to switch to black. So instead this is a black 5" by 5" square piece, and that twine is sandwiched between. And I'll tie a bow with this twine, and when the recipient gets the card, they can untie this and open the card inside. You could use ribbon or anything you want here. I like twine because it's not too bulky when it goes through the mail. The sentiment that I'm using on this card is from the new Studio Katia Birthday Greetings stamp set. This is a great set because it has sentiments that can go on the front of the card and on the inside of the card. I also like that a few of the messages have the word crafty in them, which I think is fun to send to crafty friends. So I'm putting my card back into my MISTI and stamping the sentiment, "Happy Birthday to my crafty friend," on the inside. So here is the completed card. I decided not to put anything on the front and not to add any embellishments. I felt like it had enough going on already. When the recipient gets it, they untie the bow, they see the greeting, and then I can have a personal message on the inside of the card. I use a 6 by 6 white envelope to go along with this, and it's perfect for this 5" by 5" note card. Okay, so that example shows how to do a stamp fold card with a large image, but I wanted to show you how you can also do this design with a bunch of smaller images. This takes a little bit more work, but it's definitely worth the effort. Okay, so for these cards, I am using the new Studio Katia Under the Sea stamp set. This has some really adorable sea images along with some fun sentiments, and I'll actually create 2 cards with this set. I'm also using the Studio Katia Shell Ebration stamp set. This has a cute little turtle on it. And I'm using the coordinating dies for both of these sets. So what I did is I stamped on Bristol cardstock with the VersaFine ink just as I did earlier. And I stamped a bunch of images. This time I'm using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens with a water brush. The reason I did this is this gives a softer watercolor look. And it really is fast to do. So you can see here I'm quickly coloring one of the jellyfish. I put down a light purple ink, and then I kind of spread that color out with a water brush. You can still blend 2 colors together if you want to, and you can go back and add more color if you want to on top. So here I've done a blue little squid, then I'm coming in and adding some purple at the tips, and then using my water brush to blend them together. So this is another fun way to use those Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. Okay, so next I have my Avery removable adhesive sheets. Now these are what I normally use for masking, but here I'm going to use it to help me adhere all of these little images together. So you can see I stamped and colored and die cut out a bunch of those little guys. I've arranged them on a 4 1/4 by 5½ white note card. Just arrange them there, no glue, just arrange them. And I made it so that they hang off the left and right side of the card, and so that each of the images touches the ones next to them. so they're all overlapped. You'll notice I have two clusters of fish, one kind of to the left side and one kind of to the right, because I plan to have two flaps open like we did on the last card. Next, I'm taking one of those adhesive removable sheets, laying it right on top, and this will hold all of those images together. If you have press and seal, you can use that instead. However, I was sincerely too lazy to go up to the kitchen to get some. So now I'm going to flip this over and remove that piece of white cardstock. That white cardstock was just a guide for spacing. So now I have all of my images temporarily connected together. Next, we need to put some strong adhesive to really permanently connect them together. So what I'm doing is going in with my Gina Connect glue. This is my favorite strong liquid adhesive. And I'm putting adhesive wherever these images overlap. You want to use a strong adhesive to make sure that they stay put when we remove this sticky back sheet. So after I put adhesive between each, I'm really pressing them down to make sure that they're connected. I will also let this dry completely. Once it's dry completely, I can go ahead and remove that adhesive sheet that we have on the back. This adhesive sheet basically has the stick of a Post-it note, so it comes off very easily. So here I'm just carefully pulling the adhesive sheet away after the glue has completely dried. And there you can see we have the two clusters of little fish images. Now I use small images, so it took some time to color, die cut, and glue them together. But you could use bigger images and save a lot of time. So there are my two flaps of stamped images that I was going to have wrap around my card and open up. But I decided to only use the left side, so I'm saving that right side for another card. I added a few more stamped images just to make this bigger. But basically, this cluster of stamped images will open up like a flap that I did on the first card. But instead of one large image, I have a bunch glued together. I'm again doing a score line towards the edge of the stamped images, and I'll fold that over. That's why we wanted to make sure that our stamped images hung off the edge of our white cardstock guide before, so that we had some room to do this little score line. Next, I'm putting strong liquid adhesive on the little flap of that stamp cluster. You want to make sure you use a strong adhesive here. I also created a white note card that is 4 inches wide and 5 1/4 inches tall. I'm actually going to use this note card backwards, so the opening is on the left. If you look closely, I also did cut the front of the note card to be a little bit shorter than the back, just so everything closes nicely. I'm pressing the small flap of the fish cluster right onto the back of the card and pressing it there to make sure that it's secure. Now the nice thing about this is you can leave it as is, or if you want to, you could die cut a bunch of white fish. You don't need to stamp them, and glue them on the back just to give it a more finished look, but I decided to not bother. I kind of like the look from the inside also. Okay, so next I decided I wanted to adhere some bubbles to the inside flap of this card. So I die cut the Studio Katia Halftone Dots Cover die. This die is about 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, but there's no outside edge. So you can die cut this on anything, and it creates these fun little holes. I'll use that die on my next card, but in this case, I just used it to die cut a bunch of circles very quickly. Once I was done, I added some strong double-sided tape to the back, and I adhered this onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of pool cardstock. So here is the completed card. I switched to have my sentiment on a pool die cut circle. I added that on top. You can see the flap of clustered little fish here, a little fun school of fish, opens to the left. The card opens to the right, and then there's a place to write your message on the inside. It's just a fun way to create a unique card design. Now remember how earlier I had a leftover cluster of fish that I decided not to use? Well, we're going to use that on a second card here with another fun fold card design. This time I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock that is 8 1/2 inches wide and 5 1/2 inches tall. I scored at 1¼ inch from one side, and I'll fold along this. You could do any size you want here for this little flap. This is where I will glue my little stamped images right on top. Next, from that score line, I'm going to score again at 4¼ This will create the flap that opens up on the left side. So again, I want to reinforce that score line nicely. And here we have a very simple gatefold card design, but we're going to add some stamped images to it to really give it some interest. Now I used that halftone circle die that I showed you earlier to die cut from white cardstock. I trimmed it down a bit and I'm adhering that onto one flap of this card. On the other flap, I have my cluster of fish left over from earlier. I did add a few more fish to it, and I'm gluing that right onto this little flap, making sure it hangs off the edge a bit. Now you could have glued these little images directly onto the flap. It would save a lot of time. I just had them already connected because I thought I was going to use them on the last card. I cut everything off the edge, and there we have a really fun card design. Something different, and I love all of those little fish collected close together. I added a little stamp sentiment that says birthday fishes, and then you can see how this card opens nicely to reveal an area to write your personal message inside. I again decided to skip any little embellishments on this. I feel like the little fish images add enough as is. I did decide to go and add one little fish to the inside. I think it helps to have one of the images on the inside of the card to kind of connect everything together and add a bit of interest. I really think these stamp fold card designs are a great way to create something a little interesting and get more from your stamps. Now before we go, I have a couple bonus cards for you, simply because Studio Katia came out with some stitching dies that I really wanted to use. I really like to add stitching to my cards. It's something that I can do while I'm on the go and then bring back to add to a card quickly. Now the first card that I used has the Studio Katia Stitch Border die set. This die set has several pieces that you can arrange to create really cool backgrounds, but I just used the border for the cards today. You just die cut it and it cuts a bunch of little holes, and then you can do basic cross stitching. And I'll link to a couple videos showing some tips for doing this type of stitching. Now for my sentiment, I used the Studio Katia Best Ever stamp set and coordinating dies. I like that you can do the best ever for anything. You can do uncle, coach, mom, anything. I'm going to do best friend. Now I just adhered my little stitch strip onto a white note card, then added the layered best die cut along with this stamped friend. Very simple card, and I was able to do that stitching on the go and quite something very quickly. Now my next card uses the Studio Katia Kobi Bearing Gifts stamp set. This is a cute small stamp set, really like that image. So I stamped him and colored him, and I added him onto a note card along with another stitched border. I stamped happy birthday to my crafty friend and added some little glitter pieces to the background just for some shine. So you can see stitched borders like this make a great backdrop for a simple stamped image. There you have it, some ways to create stamp fold cards along with a couple bonus cards. If you're interested in these supplies, they're linked below in my YouTube description, but you can definitely find out more over on my blog if you're interested. In the middle are a couple other related videos. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again very soon.